At the beginning of World War II, Canada found itself in the same position as Australia. They did not have much of an armoured corps or the industrial facilities to produce and support one. This meant they had to rely on the British to supply them with armoured vehicles. The war in the Atlantic, however, was not going well, and in these early years of the war, the British Army needed every tank they could produce for their own use. In 1942, a British tank mission visited the United States and Canada. The goal of the visit was to standardize the fighting vehicles produced and used by the British, the United States, and Canada. They agreed that the American medium tank M4, famously known as Sherman, would be most suitable for the role. During a later meeting, it was agreed that Canadian manufacturing should be used to produce a version of the M4A1, the cast-whole Sherman. The proposed name was the buffalo, but it was later changed to a Canadian fighting animal, the grizzly, the bear native to North America. In the fall of 1941, Montreal Locomotive Works started the production of the Ram cruiser tank. The Ram was essentially an M3 medium tank with a new upper hull and the main gun mounted in a revolving turret. This Canadian-British design fixed the major design flaw of the M3, the limited traverse of the hull-mounted 75mm gun. However, the decision was made to replace the M3's 75mm with a British 6-pounder 57mm gun mounted in a very cramped turret. For comparison, the turret ring of the Sherman was 69 inches metric in diameter, while that of the Ram was 60 inches metric. It was, however, much larger than that of the British turret rings of the time. For example, the A-12 Matilda was just 54.3 inches, 1,379mm, a substantial increase. The M4, the US-designed replacement for the M3 medium, mounted a 75mm gun in a larger three-man turret. Ultimately, the M4 was considered to be superior to the Ram. In March 1942, a month after the first production Shermans rolled off the line, the Canadians and British decided that the Montreal Locomotive Works would stop producing the Ram and begin production of the cast-whole M4A1s as soon as possible. If Montreal had been able to switch to the M4A1 by mid-1942, it would have greatly aided the Allies, as Shermans were in very high demand at the time. Ram production did not end until July 1943, after 1,950 units had been built. In that same month, they were meant to build 50 M4A1 Grizzlies, with 150 to be made each month thereafter, up to February 1944. As a result of various bureaucratic and industrial delays, Grizzly production did not commence until October 1943. By that time, Sherman production in the US was undergoing massive cutbacks. By early 1944, only 3 of the original 10 Sherman manufacturers remained in the program, and they were building the new and improved second-generation models. It is somewhat odd that Montreal Locomotive began producing a first-generation model in late 1943. It was determined that U.S. production would be sufficient to meet all Allied requirements for Shermans going forward. Grizzly production was stopped in December 1943 after 188 units had been constructed. The Grizzly I cruiser kept the general M4A1 Sherman appearance, complete with high profile and rounded armor, and from a distance it is almost impossible to distinguish them apart. The major difference between the standard M4A1 and the Grizzly is in the tracks. The Grizzly ran on Canadian dry pin, CDP tracks, which were all-metal construction and did not require the use of rubber, which was a scarce resource at the time as a result of the Japanese invasion of Southeast Asia, particularly Malaya. There was a worldwide shortage. The CDP tracks also had the added benefit of being a simpler, lighter design. These new tracks did have smaller links with a shorter pitch, which necessitated the replacement of the standard US 13-tooth sprocket wheel with a new 17-tooth wheel. The British also used this type of track occasionally, its use mostly limited to the Sexton Mark II. The track type was most prevalent with the Canadians. Imported parts from the US include castings, power unit, transmission, Browning machine guns, and the M3 L40 main gun. The Grizzly had exactly the same armor thickness as the corresponding M4A1. Grizzly production straddled General Still's changeover from welded applique to cast-in applique. This was applied in the areas of the internal sponson ammunition bins, eliminating the need for the welded-on plates that were common on the M4s. Some welded-on applique was unique to the Canadians, as the plate was made up of several small triangles that were welded together, following the contour of the M4's hull. The cast-in plates are visible from the exterior in raised portions of the armor. The Grizzly kept the Continental R975 C1 9-cylinder radial gasoline-fueled engine that provided an output of 400 horsepower at 2,400 RPM. The performance was similar, with a top speed of 24 miles an hour, 38 kilometers an hour, and a maximum range of 120 miles, 193 kilometers. Compared to the 100 miles, 160 kilometer range of the M4, this was a slight improvement. The Grizzly also retained the standard VVSS vertical volute spring suspension. Like the standard M4A1, the primary armament was a 75mm high-velocity M3 L40 main gun mounted in a fully traversable turret. Secondary armament included the .50 caliber 12.7mm M2 Browning heavy machine gun designed to efficiently destroy lightly armored vehicles or enemy troops. Secondary armament consisted of two Browning M1917 .30 7.62mm caliber machine guns, one coaxially mounted to the right of the 75mm gun, the other in a ball mount in the right front of the hull. A single 2-inch 50mm smoke mortar was also added. 2-inch smoke mortars were common features on British tanks. There are similar differences between the US and Canadian Shermans, though one was the method of turret and hull stowage. To begin with, the Canadians added a large square box to the turret bustle, held in place by a frame with a curved overhang. The overhang was curved upwards and was designed to carry rolled-up greycoats, blankets, and tarpaulins. Later on, this stowage would be replaced with a simpler conventional box. Rear hull stowage was also different from the standard M4A1. All of the equipped Pioneer tools were moved to the left rear side. This included the jack, shovel, blade facing forward as opposed to rearward on the US tank, and track tensioning wrench, known as Little Joe. Around this were 6 tie-down points. Photographic evidence shows that rolled-up camouflage netting would be tied here over the tools. Another small difference was a small hatch at the bow gunner's feet. This hatch was designed for the gunner to deploy the Snake anti-mine device from inside the safety of the tank. The Snake was an oversized version of the infantry-carried Bangalore line charge designed to clear mines and other obstacles. In the spring of 1945, the United Kingdom sent 4 Firefly turrets armed with 17-pounder guns to Canada and the United States. 3 went to Canada and 1 to the United States. The Canadians mounted theirs on the hulls of 3 Grizzlies. However, all 3 Grizzlies underwent full Firefly conversion, including the substitution of the co-driver's position to add 17-pounder ammunition stowage and the addition of the right sponson ammunition racks. These Grizzlies were the only ones to be armed with 17-pounders. Only one of these very rare tanks survives today at the Base Borden Museum. After the death of Sidney Velpe Radley Walters, the legendary Firefly ace, in 2015, the tank was named Radley Walters in his honor. The Skink was a self-propelled anti-aircraft gun, or SBAAG, based on the Grizzly. It was developed in 1944. It is one of the rare anti-aircraft variants of the M4 chassis to see any kind of production run. It featured the same CDP tracks and corresponding 17-tooth sprocket wheels. The standard turret was replaced by a new one with 4 20mm Polston anti-aircraft autocannons. These could be used against infantry and light vehicles to devastating effect if necessary. Like many other projects, it did not go beyond prototype stages. Only 3 of the planned 135 vehicles were produced. With the Allies gaining air superiority over the Luftwaffe by the day, an AA vehicle was no longer a priority. One of the prototypes was sent to the United Kingdom for assessment. With the end of Grizzly gun tank production, efforts focused on building the Sexton Mark II self-propelled gun, SPG. The Mark IIs were built on the hulls of unused Grizzlies as opposed to the ram hulls of the Mark I. In total, 2,026 Sextons were ordered, and production was carried out between 1944 and 1945. Like many other Allied tanks, the Grizzly had an APC variant, where the turret was removed from the hull. These were originally used as an expedient measure to create an APC, but were later adopted for widespread use because of the oversupply of tanks. In Canadian service, the Grizzly was only assigned to training units and never saw combat with the Canadian military. In the 1950s, 55 of the surplus Grizzlies, 40 Grizzly APCs, and a few Sexton Mark IIs were sent to Portugal as part of NATO's military assistance program. It is unknown whether any of these vehicles were used or fought in the country's colonial wars in Angola or Mozambique. A small number of Grizzly APCs found use as driver training vehicles in the Portuguese army. The tank was declared obsolete in 1973 and was taken out of service by the 1980s. They were then sold to many private collectors. As the Grizzly never saw large-scale use, the tank represents some of the finest surviving examples of the M4 tanks, with many running examples. Many of them are in the hands of private collectors, but quite a few can be found in museums across the world. Quite a few of the surviving and running M4A1s are actually Grizzlies that have been modified to look like standard US-built M4s, with the CDP tracks and sprocket wheels removed, as well as various other minor tweaks.